We've got Lake Lewis Jr. now, NFL and Washington Commanders insider, CBS and ABC TV NFL analyst, and the host of the Lake Lewis Jr. Show on YouTube. Lake, thank you so much for taking some time out of your Wednesday to chat some Commanders with us.
Hey, I appreciate you having me back on.
Yeah, of course. So just overarching, up to this point in the offseason, we'll get into the Terry McLaurin contract stuff in just a little bit, but with everything that's been going on through minicamp and some OTAs, how have things been? What are kind of the vibes with the Commanders this offseason?
I mean, everything looks good. I mean, naturally, the big question is Terry, but I think we all know, people who cover the team, that's going to get taken care of probably on the eve of, training camp. But overall, the team looks really good. They look a lot stronger, a lot faster, a lot bigger than they have in previous years. So I really feel like Adam Peters and Dan Quinn made a concerted effort to kind of match, if you will, the Eagles and how they look as far as the type of speed and size and things of that nature. And I think Washington feels like they're able to compete with the Eagles and perhaps, get to a Super Bowl.
Ooh, that word already been floated around, July 2nd. I love it. With the Eagles and everything, their strength is in the trenches, and Washington really did try to go out and match that. Laramie Tunsil, their draft picks, they really addressed the trenches of this team. How has that part of the team looked compared to last year up to this point?
I mean, they look really good. I mean, I think the big question is obviously on the offensive side of the ball, your biggest asset is your quarterback, Jaden Daniels. So you want to keep him upright and not have him running for his life out there. So what do? You go out and you get an all-pro left tackle, 4-time all-pro Laramie Tunsil to kind of man that position. Therefore, you can move Brandon Coleman, who had a pretty good rookie campaign at left tackle, but he's naturally a guard, and I think that the team realized that. So now they can move him back inside where he'll be even better as a player. When he was at TCU, he was an All-American at guard. So they're going to move him where his natural position is. And then on the other side, they drafted Josh Conley Jr. from Oregon, to man the right tackle spot. So they're shoring up a lot on that offensive line. And then remember, although I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but Sam Cosmi will be, working his way back in as well. So, naturally the big fuss is on the defensive side of the ball, Alan. And I think what it is, they didn't go out and get the big splash edge rusher and they didn't draft one. But what they did was they went out and got really good football players who can establish an edge. Maybe not get 17 sacks, but not get gassed on the run. And that's where the defense was porous last year. So, you go out and you get a Dedrick Wise, who has a Super Bowl pedigree coming from New England. They brought in Javon Kinlaw, who a lot of people, including myself, feel like you're going to see his best football in a burgundy and gold uniform because everything's conducive for him to be better. And then they went out and got Eddie Goldman, another, 300-plus pounder. And these guys were all brought in to be able to hold up the line, to be able to create lanes for the linebackers to do some things. So I really like what I see in the trenches right now.
So a guy that's been floated a lot with the Commanders this offseason, Trey Hendrickson, and potentially adding him in. I mean, I think every time a new pass rusher comes out onto the market, I've been seeing with TJ Watt and all the rumors surrounding him, I've seen Commanders could trade for him. At this point, it feels like that the Commanders don't really need to go out and get a player like Trey Hendrickson or TJ Watt. They're pretty set with what they've got.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right. You're correct. I don't think they necessarily – let me rephrase that. You can always use players of that caliber. But I don't think that they need to disrupt what they have in play in order to get a player like that or TJ Watt. I mean, you're going to have to give up something, and you're going to have to give up something very valuable to you, whether it be another player, or if it's, draft picks. And that draft capital is important when you see how the Eagles draft in your own division and win Super Bowls. You kind of want to keep in pace with them, So, and I think the natural thing is that, when you think of Trey Hendrickson, you don't have to worry about, putting Terry McLaurin in a trade. That's not going to happen anyway. But just for those who like to float those things out there, you can't do that with him because Cincinnati's already cap strong, and they have most of that in 2 receivers and a quarterback. So naturally, the talk will be Pittsburgh, who just lost George Pickens. DK Metcalf's there, but they need some more weapons. And Terry, his style of play does fit the city of Pittsburgh. However, that's not going to happen. And I think Washington right now feels really secure with the players that they have on their team, and they feel good about their defensive line right now.
Lake Lewis Jr., NFL and Washington Commanders insider, joining us on this Wednesday morning. And you brought up Terry. The contract situation is hovering over this team. What are the issues holding it up at this time?
Well, it's hard to say just because I don't really feel like there are too many issues. I know a lot of stuff's being floated out there, but I just know how business is done in the league. And normally players of this stature who are looking for contract extensions normally happen on the eve of training camp. They normally happen the week leading up to training camp, if not a couple days after training camp starts. So they're on pace to get this thing done, and it's not going to disrupt anyone. All the players that I've spoken with, they're all in support of Terry. They think he's earned it, and they don't feel like there's any kind of discord or some of the harmony for everything that's going well with this organization is broken. That's more chatter for fans and more chatter for outside media who aren't really in the building. I can tell you from being in the building that this will get done, and it's going to get done, and everyone's going to be happy. I'm even inclined to feel like Terry might even take a discount, and I don't mean a discount that's going to put him under $30 million. It has to start at $32 million if you really want to, break this thing down numbers wise, because when you look at some other receivers around the league who are making $30 million, DK Metcalf is almost at 31. Terry McLaurin's had a better career than DK Metcalf. I think we all can agree to that if you just look at the overall body of work. I think that, Terry has to start at like 32. So maybe, I think 2 weeks ago I had mentioned that maybe 36, 37 could be the number. And that was just because the market has grown. It doesn't mean that he's the second best receiver in the league. I'm not saying that because I don't think he is. I think he may be the fourth best receiver in the league. But with all that said, Alan, I think they're the number that you really should probably look at for Terry to get this thing done where everyone's extremely happy. It's probably going to be $33 million to get it done. And I think Terry wants to win more than he does want to make money. I know that may sound crazy for people out there who are driving to work or listening at work. But yeah, I mean, if you can stay the man on a team that you helped build, let's be honest.
Yes.
Team that is, Super Bowl ready, capable. Now you have a franchise quarterback. What's the difference between $34 million and $33 million? Yes, we know it's $1 million, and that's a lot of money. But do you want to win or do you want to lose and make money?
Yeah, maybe like a $34.1 million a year, so that will check in right above CeeDee Lamb, right behind Jamar and Justin Jefferson. That could be right in the wheelhouse. Do you think it's average per year that he's looking at more, or potentially fully guaranteed, or maybe even the length of this contract?
I think it's the fully guaranteed money, because when you go back and you look at the last 5 big signings as far as wide receivers, each year, going all the way back to Amon St. Brown, in Detroit, he kind of set the market. And people thought Detroit was nuts for doing what they did because they paid him a lot of money, but he's a really good football player. So each year you go to CeeDee Lamb, then you go to Justin Jefferson, and then last year was Jamar Chase. Each year those receivers have had record-breaking contracts, and not just record-breaking for the amount of overall money, but the guaranteed money. And that's what you were saying. It makes perfect sense. If you're Terry, you're going to be turning 30. Still has really good football ahead of him. I don't know why people think you turn 30 and all of a sudden in sports that's a death knell. This guy's best football is ahead of him because he never really had a quarterback until last year, and he had his best year. So I think for Terry, he just wants to make sure that at this point, because let's face it, this will probably be the last really big contract that he'll receive. So, you want to make sure you get those guarantees in there. And I think it's going to have to be guaranteed money, no less than $90 million, but realistically over $100 million in guaranteed money, probably to the tune of like $110, $115 million.
Lake Lewis Jr., NFL and Washington Commanders insider, joining us here on Fitz the Bill this Wednesday morning. Last question here, Lake, for you before we let you go. this schedule this year a little bit more difficult for the Commanders as compared to last year. And I know when we started, you were saying maybe Super Bowl on the mind, things like that. But with the internal expectations for this team, what are those like compared to maybe the fan expectations? Because sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the two.
Yeah, I mean, that's another great point. I think the attitude in the building is they're a Super Bowl team. They truly feel like they are. I think a lot of people have to remember in that NFC Championship game last year where they lost to the Eagles, and I think the score was a little misleading. I know the Eagles hung 55 on them, but it was pretty much a lot of that damage was done in the fourth quarter when the game was pretty much over. I think if you go back and you look at the first half of that football game, and as poor as Washington played, they still were in the football game. Midway through the third quarter, they still technically were in the football game before the wheels fell off. But they picked the worst day to have their worst game of the season, And I think a lot of those guys, I know some of them told me this, that they felt like they left one on the field last year and they didn't have their best performance. And now they're retooled. They've added in the Deebo Samuel. They've brought in a Will Harris on defense, Devon Kinlaw. I mean, they've went out and addressed the areas of need. They drafted, really well. They drafted for speed and athleticism. I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a running back, is a guy that fans really need to keep their eye on because he could cause some problems as far as not just his play on the field, but as far as the pecking order of running back on this football team because he's that talented. So with all that stuff said, I think this team understands that they're going to have a tough schedule. They have a lot of primetime football games. We're going to be going to Spain this year as well. But I think that those are all warranted things. And I think that those are things that if you're a competitor, you want this stuff on your plate to prove to people that last year wasn't a fluke. And the big thing that I think fans need to really relax and understand is Washington has a franchise quarterback. When you have a franchise quarterback, anything is possible for you every year and to get to a Super Bowl. And all you have to do is look at the Bills and the Ravens and Kansas City. I know people will say, well, Buffalo and Josh Allen and Baltimore and Lamar Allen have never been to the Super Bowl, but they've been on the cusp every year, and they're always a contender, as they will be this year. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, they go to Super Bowl. So I think when you have that caliber of quarterback that can lead a team and is different, and you can see with your own eyes, Jaden Daniels is different. He's an elite talent. Washington's going to be a player for years to come because of that. Look at Philadelphia. Look at Jalen Hurts. May not have the flashy numbers, but all he does is win, and now he's winning Super Bowl. So you need a quarterback, and when you have that, you should feel like you're a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, the Commanders have checked the most important box, which is get your quarterback. Everything else, as evident from last year's play, everyone came in thinking that the team was going to be another rebuilding year, but they got their quarterback, and so they leapfrogged their way to the NFC Championship game. They've done the most important thing. They're set now. It's just everything else is making sure that it is set around Daniels.
Yeah, and I think it is. I mean, I do. I like the mixture of what they're doing. I think the kid Jalen Lane from VTech. I'm telling you, I think that he's going to be, just a really nice bonus to the roster because of his speed and his playmaking ability. And I kind of look at him and what he did at VTech. In their offense. They didn't really necessarily script certain type of plays for him, but they utilized his athleticism and reverses and, all types of different, if you want to call them gimmicky plays. Well, guess what? He's got the ultimate tutor in front of him in Deebo Samuel, so now he can learn from the best at, doing multiple things from that wide receiver position. And it's only going to make Washington's offense more dangerous because now you can't just put a safety over top of Terry now. Now you're going to have other players that are really good that you're going to have to watch. And again, offensive line protection for Jaden will be much better. Jaden will now be able to survey the field for another half second, and think about what kind of damage he can do with that with these weapons. So, they feel really good about everything that they've done around Jaden Daniels, and they should.
Awesome. Lake, thank you so much for the insights. Appreciate the time on this Wednesday morning. Have a great week, and hopefully you get a little bit of rest before the season starts in 3 weeks, 4 weeks when training camp starts?
Yeah, I mean those days of resting are done. but I appreciate the thought anyway, and yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Look forward to coming back on.
Yeah, of course. There goes Lake Lewis, a NFL and Commanders insider. Works with CBS, ABC as a TV NFL analyst and the host of the Lake Lewis Jr. Show on YouTube. You can follow him on Twitter at Lake Lewis Jr. JR. And you can get all of his insights over there as well. That's at Lake Lewis Jr. on Twitter.